The following is a production of the Dallas Genealogical Society. For more information, please visit our website at dallasgenealogy.org.
Eva is a genealogy and local history librarian with a passion for connecting people with their roots. She has been researching her own family history since 1998. Eva earned a Master of Library and Information Science degree from the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign and a Bachelor of Arts from Illinois College. She is on the Illinois State Historical Records Advisory Board and a consultant at the Wilmette Family Search Center. Eva is presented at Wilmette Public Library, DeKalb County History Center, Glidden Homestead, Allen County Public Library, and at other organizations. She also contributes to DeKalb County's Corn Silk magazine and has written 2 locality guides. Welcome, Eva.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for inviting me here to speak to you today. Today, I'm going to be talking about organizing your digital genealogy files. So in '98, I was young and I started researching my family's history. And I started on paper, but pretty soon there were a lot of digital files on my computer, on my dad's computer, that were piling up. And so over the years, they've been scattered all over the place. And I never really had them in a specific spot. When I was doing my Master's of Library Science, I did take a digital archiving class that was really interesting. And one of the projects was a personal archiving project. So during that class and afterward, I started gathering up all those things and files that had been scattered everywhere else and created a digital family history archive for myself and my family. And today I'm going to be talking about that, how to put an archive together for yourself. So let's start talking about that. So do any of these things sound familiar to you? You're looking for a document, you're looking for maybe your great-grandfather's birth certificate, you know you had it scanned, but you can't find it. You know, is it on the computer? Is it on my hard drive? Is it on my flash drive? Where is it? Or you're looking at a file, your downloads file, maybe on your computer. Maybe it looks a little bit like that list of files there where you don't know what it is, you don't remember why you saved it or where it's from. Maybe it's that, you know, like that German record there. I'm not too great on German. I don't remember what that record is, where it came from, any of that. I can read Wishmeyer on that, but besides that, I don't remember why I saved that. Maybe you have weird file formats and names, like I said, that list there. Maybe you have some corrupted files or pixelated images where you know you have this picture scanned, but you open it and it looks like my great-grandmother there, where it's all pixelated and does not look that great. Maybe you scanned it 15 years ago and now it just looks awful. And you have your various genealogy stuff throughout your various devices. You know, you have some stuff in your email, you have some screenshots on your phone, you have some stuff in your downloads folder on your computer, you have other stuff on your tablet, you know, things, and you have some stuff online. You know, you have things all over the place. And so when you're looking for something, you can't find it, you don't really know what you have, and it's causing all kinds of problems, and it's causing you to lose track of things or maybe do work over again when you already have your great-grandfather's birth certificate, but you can't find it. So what are we going to do to remedy that? We're going to archive it. So archiving digital files is a little bit different, actually quite a lot different than archiving physical files. So physical files, if you got papers all over your office, it takes up a lot of space. You can see it. But with digital files, of course, they're on a hard drive, they're on your computer. They take up a small amount of space usually, takes up digital space, but you can't see it. It's not piling up in your office. Paper files you can access without special equipment. You just pick it up and look at it. Whereas digital files are going to require specific media to access. How many of us still have floppy disks? hanging around. You need specific machinery and specific things in order to access the files on that floppy disk. A physical document is going to have maybe information written on it about the document, whereas digital files are going to have information stored in metadata, and we're going to get to some definitions in a minute. Paper documents are stored in boxes, binders, folders, sleeves. Digital files are going to be stored on storage media or in the cloud. Again, we'll talk about this in a second. Certain physical formats can degrade over time, like you think about newspaper or acetate film is going to degrade over time. And likewise, certain file formats will degrade over time or become corrupted, or you aren't going to be able to access it. Physical files can be damaged by degrading materials, sunlight, insects, moisture, natural disaster, those kinds of things. Moisture and natural disaster can also damage your digital files if it damages the hardware. But, if the hardware fails in one way or another or becomes obsolete, maybe like those floppy disks, then you may lose access to those files that are on there, or you might lose access to your online accounts. Maybe you get hacked or something, or your computer fails and you lose those. So things can be damaged either way. But generally, physical files can be in the same condition for long periods of time if they're stored right. Digital archives and digital files are going to require active migration to new media and file formats, so it's a little more active maintenance. You can't just stick it on a hard drive and stick it in your closet and hope that it's accessible in 100 years. Whereas maybe if you stick a box of photos in your closet, it'll be in generally the same condition for 100 years. So how are we going to archive these things, and how are we going to set them up? So digital archiving is not the same as simply backing up your files. Backing up is part of it, but there's going to be some other things that go into it. So it requires active management. So the last thing that we're going to be talking about is how to protect and manage these digital files over time. So the goals of digital archiving is the preservation of the integrity of the files. Here's a photo of my great grandmother here. So we don't want it to get all pixelated and degraded and look worse over time every time we save it. Like this, what has happened to this photo here. We want it to stay in generally the same kind of quality and stay the same and stay accessible, and future accessibility. We want our digital files to be accessible so we can use them and see them when we need to, including maybe 50 years from now. And we want them to be findable also. So with those goals in mind, we are going to archive our digital files. So before we get too far, I do want to define some things so we're all on the same page. So when I talk about digital items or digital files are electronic items that are made up of tiny pieces of information called bits. These bits are essentially like ones and zeros in a long sequence that tell the computer or tablet or smartphone or electronic device how to use them and how to display that item. So digital files need some kind of device like that to read it and access it and display it. Analog refers to all materials that don't encode information that way. So like books, cassettes, printed photographs, handwritten letters. So anything physical that does not require an electronic thing to access it. Digitization, we're not really going to talk about today, but there is a difference between, digital files and digitization. So digitization is the process from taking it from analog to digital. So, converting those cassette tapes to a digital audio file. So, the actual music or whatever you're digitizing stays the same, but it's in a different format. Or also scanning is called digitization. Backup is to make a copy of your digital files for short-term retrieval. It's usually a short-term thing. It's not always like a long-term thing. We are thinking long-term when we're doing this digital archive. So it's not just simply making that copy and calling it a day. There's usually other things. So when you back something up, usually there's no further efforts to maintain the access to those backup files. It's just a backup. So we want to archive our things. So actively preserve copies of our files and migrate them to new media and file formats to ensure future access. So it's an action, it's a verb to archive something, and also what we are creating, the noun is called an archive. So what we're calling our grouping of digital files that we're going to preserve long term, we're also calling that our digital archive. Digital preservation refers to the series of managed activities necessary to ensure continued access to our digital materials for as long as possible. So those are the things that we're doing in order to create our archive and maintain it. Hardware and software. So hardware on a computer is all the physical parts or of the computer or device, like the case, the screen, the keyboard, the mouse, the hard drive, the motherboard, those kinds of things. The software is the programs and operating system that is on the computer, so software might be like Family Tree Maker and Microsoft Word and those kinds of things. File format. So a file format is the standard way that information is encoded for storage on a computer file. So it tells the computer how to display, print, process, those kinds of things. So a like .mov is like a movie format. So it's going to tell the computer, this is a movie. You need to it has audio and video with it, audio and images. So you need to display it in a certain way where that's going to be different than displaying, say, a text document. So think of it as kind of like VHS or DVD. They're different formats, and so you need different things. Metadata. So metadata is information that describes an item. So for example, if you have a digital photograph, the metadata would include the file name, the date that it was taken, the type of camera used, location that the photo was taken, the date modified, for example. All of that information is called metadata. And when we're talking about in the cloud, so files that are in the cloud are ones that are stored remotely on a different company's servers and are accessed through the internet. So, and you have to use a cloud storage service provider for this typically. So examples are like Google Drive, Dropbox, OneDrive, iCloud, those kinds of things. All right. And there's also a copy of these and a few other terms on page 4 of your handout. So if you want to refer to it, you can. All right, so the steps that we're going to do in order to set up your digital family history archive are 4 basic steps. Finding your files, organizing your archive, so setting up the folder structure that you're going to use, preserving the files and making them ready to go into your archive, and then moving them into your archive, and then protecting them. So I would say step 1 and 2 are usually the shorter ones, pretty quick to find all your files or make a list, set up your archive, and then 3 is going to take you quite a while to do, and then 4 is an ongoing thing that you'll be doing from now on. So let's start talking about some of these. First, you are going to want to locate all of your digital files and data. You want to have an idea of what you have, what's out there, and where it is. So you can use page 1 of your handout to start thinking about these things and jot some notes down for yourself. So where do you keep your family tree? Is it on Family Tree Maker, on your computer? Is it on Ancestry? Where do you keep your family tree and family information? Where do you have your scanned family photos or, digital family photos? Are they on your phone? Are they on your laptop? Where are they at? Saved documents when you download it, from Ancestry or Family Search. Where are those documents? Or maybe they're in your email because you emailed them to yourself. Maybe they're on a flash drive. Track them down. If you have family video or audio, where are those photos? Where do you have your digital correspondence? Is it in your email? Is it in text messages? Where are all those things? So here's an example of where things might be. I went through some of these. think about your family tree, maybe photos of family grave sites and buildings. Maybe that's going to be on your phone. Recent photos you've taken with family on your phone, or maybe on your camera, maybe on your laptop, scanned family photos, downloaded records. We went through some of these already. Look on social media, our photos on social media, those kinds of things. Right now, this step is just jotting down where those things might be. You think you have the CDs in your office, maybe put them on the corner of your desk, but this step is just locating them. It's not quite digging through all those things and um, looking at the files just yet. So this is kind of a planning stage, saying, okay, here's where all the things are, and maybe what do I want to look at first? So this is the planning stage. Don't forget to look in your online accounts, like your cloud storage, your online email, other genealogy sites. Maybe you've just saved it to your shoebox on Ancestry, but you haven't quite downloaded it yet. Look on computers, current and old, tablets, phones, hard drives, current and older ones, flash drives or zip drives. And don't forget about other things laying around, DVDs, CDs, SD cards, floppy disks. You want to gather all of those and maybe put them on the corner of your desk and say, okay, here's all the things that I need to look through. I think there's genealogy files, but at this point, I'm not quite sure what's on there. Or maybe you do take a peek and say, okay, there's genealogy files I need to address on here. So here's an example of maybe where some of those things might be. All right, so we have our list. We have maybe 10 pieces of things to look through, different hard drives and computers. Now, before we start digging through our files and messing with all of those, we need to set up a place to put our files once we've started looking at them and renaming them. So you're going to choose a new place where you're going to archive all these files. So this is where your master archive is going to be. We're going to talk about backups later on, but we want a main place where all of this is going to be centralized. Maybe it's going to be your computer or laptop. If it has enough room on it, that's a good choice. And if it's not, at risk of failing tomorrow, that might be a good choice. Maybe you buy a new external hard drive or solid state drive. Maybe you do it on a DVD-R or in cloud storage, but personally, I would recommend maybe your computer or laptop or an external hard drive, or solid state hard drive, an external one, that you make as your master. So this chart right here does talk about the lifespan of certain media and what might cause some things to fail. So solid state hard drives are going to be lasting the longest. According to this chart, it does say that they could last more than 100 years, but typically with regular use, it might be about 50 years. So those do last quite long, but are quite expensive still, to have a really, really large one, but they are getting a lot more affordable. Standard external hard drives with regular use could last up to 34 years or longer if they aren't regularly used. Typically, I've seen that the recommendation is still to replace them every 7 to 10 years, because sometimes they do fail a little earlier. DVD-R could last up to 30 years or longer. But you do have to have, a drive to write and to read a DVD on your computer. So that may be a hindrance to you. And then some of these other formats may not last as long with regular use. So you're going to pick where you're gonna put all these files. And then you're going to develop an organizational structure of the folders on that. So this takes a little bit of thought and a little bit of planning. You want an organizational structure that works for you is expandable, meaning that when you're researching further branches of your family tree, you can add things to it. You can add more folders. It's not a rigid structure that is self-contained that you can't add things to and is consistent. So if you have a certain file structure for the earlier branches of your family, you want it to be consistent all the way through. And I can't tell you what is going to work for you because your research and your um, files and your brain is going to be different than anyone else's. So it needs to be something that makes sense to you and is going to work for you. But you are going to want to be grouping your files into these folders. So think about what kind of files you have. So I had some administrative ones. I had a lot of family files of different families and especially of the more recent families, my grandparents. And, I had to come up with something that was going to work for me with those kind of files. If you have an organizational system for your physical files, I might recommend that they're similar. So you organize your digital files similar to your physical files. Um, because then it's consistent for you and you don't have to keep switching back and forth and figuring out what is where. So if you already have an organizational system, maybe come up with something similar for your folder structure for your digital file. All right, so there's different options. So I'm going to go through some options, but there's a lot more options out there. Before we get too far, there is on your handout a list of other resources, I believe on page 3. Yes. And one of those is Cindy's list. So on Cindy's list, there's the link to the organizing and filing systems. There are some other examples that you can look at there if some of these don't work for you. So I recommend going there and taking a look and poking around before you start setting up all your folders and creating all the folders. Really think about what's going to work for you. What I ended up picking is a system that was based on family units. So, marriage unit folders is what I started with. And then there's different groups based on branches of my family tree. I didn't want a giant, huge list of, different branches of my family tree. So I did break it into multiple subfolders. So it looks a little bit strange here, but I have all of at least my family files organized by family unit. So my great-grandparents, Glenn and Mildred Kaiser, are at the top there in the second column with number 4. So anything related to their family unit is going to be there. I have highlighted here a family unit for George and Judith Church. And so any records related to that family unit are going to be in there. So basically anything for that couple from their marriage forward, including their kids. So when their kids were still in their household and young, all of the things for that household are going to be in there. So that made sense for me, but maybe that's not going to work for you. You want, individual files, individual folders. So maybe you would prefer something more like a surname folder. So there's the surname folder is the overhead folder, and then all the subfolders are by type of record. So this combines, a surname folder with different types of records. And then under heart and birth, here's a whole list of all of the birth records and birth certificates for anyone named Hart. So maybe if you're doing a surname project or something like that, this is going to be a better choice for you. And this system is from Diane Hall from Michigan Family Trails. Maybe you have a lot of files related to different places, so you could arrange your archive by location. So start with the country and then state and then county or parish and village or town, for instance, and do it that way, have things organized that way. So there are other options out there. So I do recommend poking around on Cindy's list to see what other options there are. Like you could arrange them by surname and then by individual, by surname and then family unit. So there are different ways to organize. So really take some moments to think about that. Maybe look at a sampling of your files to see what you have and how you might want to organize them, and think about how you are going to be using them. So when you need to access your files, are you looking for all the birth certificates all together? Are you looking for, a particular family unit because you're really focusing on one particular family? So think about how you're going to be using your files and arrange them accordingly. So in order to keep it all straight, this is optional, but you could create a digital archive guide. So this is basically a list of all the folders you're creating in your archive. So I have basically two sections in mine. I have the locality files and I have the family files. So I have a list. And I have this printed out with some of my physical files and have it in there so that, first of all, if something happens to me and someone's looking at my physical files, they can look at this and see, oh, she has a digital archive. And on this guide, I will also say where the hard drive is normally stored and those kinds of things. But they can also see, okay, here's everything that is in my files, the locality files and the family files and how it's organized. When I was setting up my archive, this also helped me keep things straight, which folders I needed to create. And basically, I went down the list and created the folders. So it helped me as I was setting things up. So I do recommend, writing this out before you go in and create the folders. During this step, you are going to plug in the external hard drive that you bought, maybe it's a new one, and then start creating folders in there and setting up the framework for where you're going to be putting in all of this. As we're going through and sorting our files and looking at them, we don't also want to be having to create the folders because you're doing two different things at once and the folders might get mixed up. So I recommend setting up all of the folders for your archive ahead of time. So once you have it all set up, now it's time to actually fill it with all of those files that are all over the place. So during this step, there's four main things you're going to be doing for each file that you're looking at. So you're going to evaluate it and see if it's something that you need to save. Decide if you need to resave the file in a different file format. So evaluate the file format, rename it into a standard format. We'll talk about that in a minute, and move the file into its appropriate place in your new archive. So move it into that file, those folders that we just created. Okay, so let's talk about this. And like I mentioned at the beginning, this step is probably going to take the longest. If you're like me, you've got stuff everywhere, you've got duplicates everywhere. It does take time to go through this and get it all organized. But don't get overwhelmed, don't get worried about it. Just take it a little bit at a time. So the first step, you want to gather all your files. Like I said, you maybe had all the media and hard drives and CDs and those kinds of things piled on the corner of your desk. Now you're going to pick one of those, put it on your computer and open up the files and go through one of those pieces of media at a time. So maybe you're going to open up the hard drive that you've been, or maybe the flash drive. Start with a smaller thing where it is a file that, or a piece of media that you've been using recently. Maybe it's a flash drive that you used last week, and start there because you're familiar with the files and you know what they are. So maybe move them onto your flash drive or open them up on your computer, or sorry, hard drive, and then open them up on your computer. You want to be able to work with them in one location. And then look at each file on there. Decide whether it's worth keeping. So maybe it's something that you don't really need. You had downloaded it, but it's not relevant anymore. So that can be deleted. Maybe you have a bunch of duplicates of things, and so look at the different duplicates. This photo was scanned twice, and I maybe don't need to keep the pixelated one that was scanned 20 years ago. I have a much better version of it now. These were two different copies of the same photograph, so I'm going to keep the one that is not faded and not torn and is the digital file looks great. So I'm going to keep that one and I'm going to delete the other one. If you do have a lot of duplicates, there are programs out there to help you weed out the duplicates. Um, so I recommend looking into that. So I ended up having a lot of backups on some of my hard drives. And so I used programs, there's like Dupe Guru, and there's a lot of other ones that, especially with photos, will help you find those duplicates and decide which ones to keep. So you really only want to keep the best copy that you have. You don't really need all the different versions of it. Or maybe you have drafts of a family history that you were writing, and you really just need to save the finished copy unless there's a reason to save the draft. So evaluate whether it's something you need to keep and delete the other ones. Weed them out. Then you need to look into whether you need to resave it. So there are a lot of file formats out there. For family tree files, there's the GED, which many of us may be familiar with, but there's also FTM and FTW, which are Family Tree Maker. There's FDB, which is a legacy family tree. There's PAF, which is a personal ancestry file. So there's these other versions out there. And same with images. There's JPEGs, there's TIFFs, there's PNGs, there's GIFs, there's Photoshop ones, there's bitmaps, and there's all these different file formats out there. We are going to want to pick a file format that we think is going to be future proof. So there are some of these file formats that are proprietary, so they require a certain software in order to open them. For example, WordPerfect ones. If it's in a certain file format, maybe you don't have WordPerfect on your computer anymore, you may not be able to open that. Or, old Paint files or old Photoshop files, maybe you won't be able to open them in the future. You have to have a certain version of Photoshop to open it. Something I ran into is my dad used to get copies of our photos he used to develop them at Kodak, and they provided a CD. Well, I cannot access those digital photos on those CDs because those CDs require like the Kodak software in order to open them. So I had a challenge getting those files off of those Kodak CDs. So we're going to prefer to have our files into file formats that are not going to require those special software to open and is going to be high quality, uncompressed, and lossless, which means it doesn't degrade each time you edit it or open and close it. So a lossy file format is going to delete some information from the file every time you resave it. We want a file format that is not going to do that, especially with images and videos and audio. We want a lossless file format. So on your handout, let's see what page it's on. It's on page 2. There are some common file extensions for different types of files, and then for personal archiving, what the preferred archival format is going to be. Especially with videos, if you've had like VHS tapes digitized, those kinds of things, or like the film reels digitized for video, those files can be quite large, but that's okay. Just get a hard drive that is going to be able to hold those large files, because that's going to be the best quality and the best way to save it long term. So here are, oh, and before I forget, when you're looking at the file format and deciding, what is it, and you don't know what it is, you can go to fileinfo.com, and that will give you information. You can put in the file format extension, and it'll tell you what it is, where it's from, if it's from a Kodak photo CD or where it is, and it'll tell you. If your images, sorry, if the files that you have do not have the extension on it, so if you can't see the .jpeg at the end, on a Mac computer, you can go to Get Info, or on a Windows computer, you can go to Properties, and it'll tell you more information about that file, and it'll tell you what kind of file format it is. So here's a few examples of our preferred file formats. For family tree files, it's typically a JED file. For images, I prefer TIFFs, but you could also do JPEG, but TIFFs are probably more preferred than JPEGs. For documents, you want a docx or a text or a PDF. For videos, .mov or .mp4 or AVI, for audio, .wav or .aiff. Um, and if you need help converting them from whatever it is into one of these, there are tutorials online. So I recommend just Googling, how to convert .mp4 to something else. And then you can get um, specific instructions on how to do that. All right, now the renaming part. So right before you move it into your archive, you're going to take it from the list on the left-hand side here of all the random naming things that are there, and you are going to come up with a standard way of naming your files. So one of the recommended ways that I would recommend is something like this at the bottom. So maybe you do last name underscore first name underscore year of the record, and then maybe what it is, where it came from, etc. Very brief. We don't have to keep our file names to just 8 characters anymore. They can be much longer, but you don't want it to be like paragraphs long. So keep it as brief as possible, and then be sure that the file format is at the end. Maybe if you have a lot of files about different locations, maybe you do a specific location, then general location, the year, and then what it is and where it came from. So for example, this list is fairly standardized, but maybe a good one is the Alex Holbrook. So Holbrook underscore Alex underscore 1895. It's a newspaper article and it came from the Ohama Daily Bee. So I had put the title of the newspaper in there and then the date of it. So this is my way of standardizing it. Maybe you have something slightly different. But do something that'll work for you. And I did it this way so that all of the things for the same person are going to show up and be clustered together. So all the things for Alex Holbrook, if I had more, are going to show up there, and then be in order from the earliest to the latest. So in the bare minimum, I do recommend having the last name, first name, and then the date so that everything that you have for that same person together is all together. A side note for women, so you see the Kate Armstrong one at the top. For women, I generally use the name that they had in the record with my files. Maybe you're going to have them organized a little bit differently. Maybe you're always going to have women listed in as their maiden name. But I generally use the name that they had in whatever record. So Kate Armstrong, her maiden name was Kate Holbrook. Her name at her death was Kate Armstrong, so I have that as part of the file format. And we rename things this way in order to make them searchable. So we could go into our digital archive and search for Armstrong underscore Kate and bring it up. So if you do a lot of searching that way, maybe you would prefer to have women listed under their maiden name. So if you can search for Kate Holbrook and everything for her comes up. We want to be able to access it by searching and by browsing. So when I go to the Holbrook folder, I can also browse and see everything for different Holbrook family members. All right, so we've done a lot of work right now. Okay, the getting it off the flash drives and hard drives, looking at the file formats, making sure they're good, renaming them, that can take a lot of work. But then you're going to move it into your digital archive, into the place where it's supposed to go. So all those Holbrook things are going to be dumped in the Holbrook folder and organized that way. And so once you've gone through your first little grouping, maybe everything that was on your flash drive, then move on to the next thing on your list. Maybe it's a larger hard drive and it's going to take you a little longer. Maybe you're going to be looking through your email for all those file attachments and then downloading them and moving them into your archive. Maybe you're going to download your online family tree from Ancestry as a GEDCOM and put it into your archive. So go through one by one all the things on your finding list and check them off. Um, as you're going through here, especially with some of those older files that you haven't looked at in, 10 years, maybe longer, you may come across some files that are damaged. You can't open them. You have no idea what it is. Maybe it is those Kodak CDs and you don't know what to do with them. As you're doing this, set those aside and save those kind of for last because it'll maybe take a lot longer to address those. Um, if you do need help, I don't know if there's tech help at Dallas Public Library, but maybe ask a librarian, Google it, ask a family member, see if there's anything that can be done about that specific thing, and see if there's any resources out there. Maybe there's technology on the computers at the library or a different library that can maybe help you open those files, things like that. Um, Maybe you can borrow a floppy disk reader from someone. My dad happened to have one still that, was from floppy disk to USB, so I could access some of those floppy disks that we had. But maybe there's one around, or maybe you can buy one used online and open up your floppy disks. So I would save all those difficult things for last, but you do have to address them somehow. And don't get discouraged and ask for help with those kinds of things. And keep working on it. So, just like our family tree is never done, our family archive is never done. We're always going to be doing more research, downloading more things. So as you are doing your research, don't just click download and then forget about it. Click download and then go to your downloads folder, rename it, and then at the end of your research session, move it into your archive where it's supposed to be, or maybe move them from your flash drive onto your archive. So this is an ongoing process, but hopefully by the time you set it up from going forward, your digital files will be a lot more organized. And so it'll be easy to just rename these 5 folders, these 5 files that you just downloaded and move them where they're supposed to go. All right, but we are not quite done because now that we have our beautiful archive that we put together, it's all organized, um, everything is there. We put so much work into it, so many hours. Now there's more things we have to do. So we can't just leave it on that one hard drive or on our computer and hope for the best. We want to plan for our files to survive in one way or another in any worst case scenario. So let's say, think about if your house burned down, or if someone broke into your house and stole your computer, or there was a water leak, or maybe you just spilled coffee on your computer. Are the files going to last? Or maybe your hard drive just fails, it just stops working. We want our files to last. We put in all that work. We don't want to lose them. So a good plan to use is the 3-2-1 backup plan. So we have our master, but we are going to have 3 copies of that master. So a working file, so our master, a backup copy, and a second backup. So we want 3 copies of it. We save to 2 media types. So maybe we have an external hard drive and then a thumb drive. Maybe, in the cloud is a different media type. Maybe we're going to back it up on a solid state drive and a regular disk hard drive. So have 2 different media types and then save at least 1 copy offsite. So cloud storage does also count as offsite. Maybe we have one of our hard drives stored not at our house, but maybe it's in a safety deposit box. Maybe it's at our son or daughter's house. So have 1 copy somewhere else. So, if your house burns down or something happens, a natural disaster at your house, that another offsite copy will survive. Okay, so we also want to have a maintenance plan. So have a schedule for syncing new changes to your backups. So, we're continuously adding things to our master digital archive. Maybe if you do a lot of research, maybe once a month, every other month. Um, Sync to your backups. Maybe if you don't make too many changes, maybe you can get away with every 6 months or a year. Have a schedule for reviewing your files and updating your file formats. I would probably review your files maybe once a year. Just take a look, make sure everything looks good. Maybe you've noticed that certain file formats, oh, like I updated my computer and now I don't have X software anymore. So before I update that, maybe I should, update my file format so I can still access those after I lose this software. You want to have a schedule for migrating your archive to new media. So like I mentioned, hard drives, especially solid state hard drives, can last a pretty long time, but we want to actively migrate our archive to a new hard drive every so often. Like I said, maybe every 7 to 10 years. It used to be every 5 years, but I think you could go a little bit longer because just because it could last for 30 years doesn't mean it will. Something could happen to it. So just to be safe, we want to migrate it to new media every so often. And also, you want to coordinate a successor for your digital archive. Um, you know, Whenever something happens to you, or if something happens to you, someone has a copy of your stuff, as your copy of your archive, and so it can last for another 100 years. Maybe also give them the schedule for a maintenance plan. Um, so let's see how that looks. So this has some older dates on it because I came up with this a while ago, but it's still relevant. So our master copy, it was created January 2018. That's our master archive. It's been, a while, so I need to definitely migrate that to a new media now. The physical location where it's stored, the schedule for syncing and checking it. So for that hard drive, I'm spot checking it every January and July. So it's January now, I'm spot checking it and probably migrating it to a new media. So schedule for migrating to new media, it says January 2023. Ooh, if I'm looking at this, it's on my bulletin board in my office and I haven't migrated it in the past 3 years. I need to do that now. And then a column for notes for when I actually did stuff. And then the same for our backup number one and backup number two. Backup number one is on a hard drive. It's going to have a similar schedule. Backup number two is in my Google Drive account. This is just an example. And I would write my username and password on there just so maybe I don't lose access to my online account. And then future caretakers also have access to this drive with their own Google accounts. So I've shared this Google Drive backup with future caretakers. So let's say my future caretakers down at the bottom, it says Mary, my daughter, David, my son, and Sarah, my cousin. I've shared this with multiple people, so multiple people have access to it. And if something happens to me or something, I lose my account, they can download a copy of it. So have something like this. I'd recommend printing it out and having it maybe somewhere visible or having it with your hard drive so that when you're looking at it, you have a record of when you did certain things. All right, so it's a lot of information, a lot of work. Don't get overwhelmed, but this is an ongoing process. Finding the things, organizing, it was kind of not as ongoing, but the preserving and protecting is an ongoing process. So this is going to be your process of how you're going to be dealing with your digital files from now on. And ultimately, the goal of all of this is preserving the files so nothing happens to them and ultimately for future access. We want to access them next week, next year, and hopefully they're going to be lasting the next 50, 100 years using this kind of method. All right. And for more resources, there's a few others listed on your handout, but there is a book called Planning a Future for Your Family's Past by Marion Burkwood. And there's also some other resources online. If you do want to dig a little deeper and have more technical information about digital archiving, the Digital Preservation Coalition has a handbook. It's primarily for organizations, but it has some really good information that you can use for your personal archive as well. And as I mentioned before, Cindy's list has a lot of examples of different filing systems that you can use for your digital archive as well. So with that, thank you so much. I believe there were some questions that came in, so please let me know what questions you have.
Hello, thank you for the presentation. I was wondering in a case where, excuse me, where you have, could be a photograph or some sort of file or something that contains a number of cousins. So they're not the direct family. Do you save multiple copies, one under each family? Or how do you handle that where it's, these people, but then there's their cousins and then there's that in-law or something like that?
Yes. So I guess it would depend on the photograph. But generally, if it's like an extended family, the pictures that I've had have had like the matriarch of the family and then like all her kids and grandkids in it. So generally, I would put it, if it was the Holbrook family, I would put Holbrook underscore, Alex family. So if it's Alex and all of his children and grandkids, I would put Alex family and then the date. Or in other cases, you could just put Holbrook underscore family and then have those kind of at the top of your folder. And generally with those, I put them into the folder where the oldest person is. So the old or the most recent common ancestor, let's say. So if it's my ancestor with all of his brothers, maybe I'll put it in his father's folder because it's that family unit. Does that make sense? And it really, you'll have to make the decision for yourself. And, if you were browsing and looking for that photograph, where would you look? Would you look under your ancestor? Or would you look under the family? Or, where would you look for that? Like I said, for me, I put it under whoever the oldest family unit is going to be. Um, you could also make, if it doesn't take up very much space, you could also make a copy of it and put it in both folders. So if it's my ancestor and his brother, you could put it in both folders.
Related question. I
Hmm
think I saw that you had an unknown folder. So if you
hmm
have photographs and you might have a guess or might not have a guess, what approaches have you used?
So generally, I know which branch of the family tree it comes from. So I'm not going to put it under general, in the general folder under unknown. I'm going to put an unknown folder, maybe if I know it's from the Holbrook side of the family, but I don't know exactly where it was. I'll create a folder under the Holbrook name and say, okay, it's approximately this generation, but I'm going to put an unknown folder here. So I know it's, the fourth generation back approximately, but I don't know exactly. So I'm going to put a subfolder there. I sometimes do that. If I know it's related to a specific family, I'll put it in the families subfolder, or sometimes it's just under the generation subfolder.
Hey, we'll do a quick online question.
Hmm
Your the Kodak story generated a little bit of interest. What the question is, what did you actually use to get the photos off the CD?
Um, I honestly don't know because I gave them to my dad and he's like, oh, I can get it off. Um, so I wonder if he used one of our old computers that still had that software on it. honestly. Because I was trying everything. I was, trying to copy the files off. I was trying to convert them online. I was not able to do it. So I think that's how he was able to do it. And he only did it with one of the CDs. I have a stack of them.
Gotcha.
So I'm sorry, I was not successful with that one. My dad was.
Gotcha.
See, you ask for help. You ask for help.
Yeah, exactly. One other quick one. Wanting to save space, is there a reason to save old media such as VHS or slides after they've been digitized?
Yes. There is a reason, but it's ultimately going to be up to you. So especially with VHS is going to continue to degrade over time. So by the way, if you all still have VHS tapes laying around, get them digitized as soon as possible because those are starting to get, in really bad shape and degrading and not being able to see the image anymore. So get those digitized as soon as possible. For the VHS, if they've degraded past a point where you can't see anything on the original media anymore, then you may decide to toss them. Um, for me, I always save the old media even after I've digitized them because, I've made precautions. I've taken the precautions for my digital archive, but what if something happens to those files? Then I still have the original media that I can digitize again. Um, but if you have tons and tons of slides, maybe it's tons and tons of slides that are of vacations and a lot of landscapes, and you got them digitized, but if they went away, it's not going to be devastating. If something happened to your digital files, it's not completely devastating, then maybe you could get rid of the slides also. So it would be a personal decision. But for me, I've decided to keep all the physical stuff, especially photographs, because photographs, if something happened in my digital files and the photograph itself was gone, that would be a little devastating for me. So I've definitely kept the photographs, but it would be a personal decision for you on that.
I appreciate this presentation because it does hit a soft spot for me
Mhm.
as someone who has been researching for over 20 years and have attempted to do an archiving project of sorts. I've run into the instance where I have family members that I find in the census
Mhm.
with their mother's maiden name. Once they start school, I find school records with them using the last name of whoever the mother is married to, because the men had
Mhm.
to sign for the kids.
Mhm.
Then once the women or the men get married, their marriage certificate has their biological father's last name. So I have an instance where one person may have 3 or 4 different surnames. So when I'm trying to archive them, it became so difficult to find where they actually fit because they're still a part of
Mhm.
this family, but they have their own individual surname, especially with the women once they get married.
Mhm.
What is their actual maiden name? Because they've been identified with 3 different last names. How
Mhm.
would you approach a situation like that?
Well, first of all, I would have all of those files together in one folder. So regardless, you could find them all under the family unit folder if you're organizing by family units. Um, and then with the file names, I guess you would make your own decision on that. If you're going to be doing a lot of searching, if you want to be able to put in your search box on your computer and, put in Holbrook underscore Kate and have all of Kate's records come up, then maybe you're going to decide, I'm going to just use the maiden name. Even if there's other names being used in the record, I'm always going to archive Kate's things under her maiden name so that if I'm searching, I'm pulling it up all together. And then when I'm browsing in that family unit folder, they're all grouped all together. Um, that might be the approach that I would use, is just decide to always use the maiden name for that person in the file names. And then when I open up the file, then I can see, oh, she's using a different name because she's using her stepfather's name in this record, and that's fine, but I understand, I know who it's for. So that might be what I would do, but you could also decide to just use the last name that is in the record and then just make sure that they are placed in the appropriate folder together so that they are all still together.
This is Tony. Would that also be a good place to consider using metadata?
Yes. Yes. I forgot to mention how to add metadata. On a Windows computer, you can go to Properties and then Details, and you can add things in the comments there and add metadata in there. So that might also be good to add things like that in the metadata. So if you use the name in the record or the file name, you could add into the comments field or the tags field the maiden name or other names of that person so that when you're searching, it still comes up. And also with those family group photos, someone had asked before, you can use the metadata to, include all of the people that are in there, the names of all the people.
We had a couple more questions online. Somebody talked about using AI enhancements like from Ancestry, and I know MyHeritage does it too. Is it preferred to only preserve the unenhanced version of the family photo as well, or do you need it after you've enhanced it?
For me, I would probably say both. I would have them have a very similar file name. I would have the original, and then for the AI enhanced one, I would add at the end like AI enhanced or something like that on the file name, or put it as part of the metadata. And yeah, I would probably say both. Unless there was, if you just was playing around with AI and you aren't using it and maybe it's a poorly generated AI one, you don't want to save it, then maybe you don't save the enhanced version, but I would say both of them.
Fantastic. Well, I think EvaANne, you have done the Illini proud. Thank you for
Thanks.
doing such an amazing job and providing such a very detailed and phenomenal workshop. Can we give EvaANne a round of applause? Thank you for joining us. Well,
Thank
with
you.
that, we are going to call the meeting to order or call the meeting to a close. Wanted to reverse and do it all over again. I'm so blown away by all this material. Truly appreciate it. And for those of you, again, the handout is available on our website, which is a really outstanding document too. So with that, we will see you back. Don't forget about, again, 3 more weeks until our German SIG event. And we look forward to having everyone together back in February. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much for having me.
This has been a production of the Dallas Genealogical Society. If you're already a member, thank you. Your fees have been supporting these and other society activities. If you're not yet a member, please consider joining now. Go to dallasgenealogy.org and click on the membership tab.